We're a unique podcast for families of faith, produced by parents and pastors who understand and appreciate how hard it is to maintain your faith in a hostile culture. We're here to encourage and support you in the most vital role of all, parenting. If you're feeling overwhelmed and afraid, it's okay. You're not alone. Brilliantly Brave is hosted by two honest and engaging dads with 9 kids between them. A road tripper, author, and pastor, Father Brad Matthias, and iShine founder, solo parenting expert, and all-around foodie, Mr. Robert Beeson. Join us each week as we explore and engage with some of the most intriguing, inspiring, outrageous, and awesome parents in the world. This is Brilliantly Brave.
Hi, and welcome to Brilliantly Brave Parenting. I am your chipper host, Pastor Brad Matthias.
Chipper?
Chipper, yeah.
Like as in happy?
As in happy, C-H-I-P-P-E-R.
Got
chipper.
it. Well, thank you for spelling that out. I'm Robert Beeson, and it's great to be here today.
Robert is not chipper. He is down.
I'm extremely happy today.
Oh, I don't know about that.
I'm just contemplative.
You have a sour look on your face.
Okay, Brad.
Well, so as you know, if you're an audience, this is season 3 of Brilliantly Brave Parenting. Robert and I have been bantering, which is another word that I like, back and forth over the last few episodes.
The last 10 years. Really.
Well, yeah, last 10 years. Robert has a new book coming out, and so he's just got a lot going on. And by the time this podcast airs, it will have just hit shelves. So tell everybody right now, let's get it out in the open. What's your book, Robert? Tell them.
The book is called Going Solo. It's Hope and Healing for the Single Parent. It's coming out on Focus on the Family.
Yes, and I'm kind of proud of him. Tyndale Publishing with Focus on the Family. He's going to be on air on the national network. He's going to be all over. You're going to see him on TV. He's famous now, and so you get a treat of having him still involved with Brilliantly Brave Parenting. And I just want to make sure we get that out there in the open so I don't forget to do it later.
Well, that's kind of you, Brad.
I do my best. As much as I tease Robert, he's an awesome guy. I love him to death. He's a fantastic man of God, and he has a lot to share for those parents who are dealing with solo struggle. So
absolutely,
yeah.
Well, I'm excited about our guest today. This is going to be a great
episode. Let's shift gears now. We do have a guest
just off air. How much smarter he is than either you or I. So
I can tell. He wears glasses. He's got a collared shirt and a sweater.
Well, I wear glasses.
Well, his are
cooler.
Well, there's something scholarly about him.
It is, and written tons of books, but we'll get into that in just a second. I'm excited about this interview.
I am too, and his website really impressed me. And without further ado, I want to introduce Champ Thornton. Welcome to Brilliantly Brave Parenting, Champ.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Brad and Robert.
Yeah, so Champ is this guy I have never met personally. We just met online here a few minutes ago, but I've seen his books, and I met his publisher at the Children's Pastors Conference this year in Orlando. And the book title that got my attention is The Radical Book for Kids. And I took a look at the art design. I looked at just sort of the hipster vibe to that whole book. And the fact that you were dealing with substantive issues for tweens and preteens got my attention. Yeah. So I can't wait to hear your story and kind of what you're up to and how you could be a help to the parents of this podcast.
So give us some background on how you got into this and how we've read your bio, but just for those who have stumbled across our podcast, how'd you get to where you're at right now?
Well, my name is Champ, and I've had that name since I was an infant. There's really nothing that I've done for that name. I don't have any background in sports to speak of, at least that I'd be willing to share. My wife and I have been married for 22 years. We've got 3 kids, almost a 13-year-old son and 8-year-old twins, a boy and a girl. So our life is hopping and exciting, and it's great being a dad. During the day, I serve as an associate pastor at a Baptist church in the state of Delaware. Delaware is one of those states that has the name written out in the Atlantic Ocean. And we've been here for just about 6 years now, and it's great to serve the Lord here. Our parenting journey right now, we are in the middle of like the elementary and middle school years, and it's just a lot of fun. Been in ministry since 2003. And have been writing's been a part of that for about the last 10 years.
Well, I can tell in reading your bio that we have a lot in common. Number one, you're a UT Vols fan. That's important.
Yeah, what's that about, living in Delaware and being a Vols fan?
Well, I kind of married into that. We really didn't have sports teams in my family growing up. But so when I got married, they were definitely into sports, and both my father and mother-in-law went to the University of Tennessee, and so it's legit. I married in, and it's not a great season to be a Vol fan, but we still.
But you're wise to stick with it because of the family.
That's exactly right.
So you've been grafted into the orange, is what happened.
Absolutely. It's great. I love being a part of a team.
I have a son-in-law, graduated UT, and he, we just had our first grandson, his son, with my daughter, and they immediately put him in like an orange Vols onesie, like an hour old. There's something about the UT Nation that just transcends what other people
I didn't
experience.
understand it. Moving from California, I was like, orange of all colors.
Yeah.
Really? You're going to really wear that out?
It's a thing.
But now, I get it.
And I'm from Illinois. We're a transplant. I've been here 15, 16 years. So I feel like I'm sort of native. But, man, when you come across a real UT fan, you realize
Unstoppable.
I'm not quite there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well,
it's a religion.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a thing. And they get 100,000 people to go to those football games, even when they're terrible. Mm-hmm. So that's amazing. Yeah. Well, Champ, I know that you have been very active in the area of reaching kids with the gospel. In other words, this idea of transference of faith. The one thing on your website, if you go to champthornton.com, the first thing that pops up is this phrase, that all generations might hope in God. And I can tell by your writing and just the titles of your books that you are very passionate about passing your faith on to your kids. And I know our audience would feel the same way. Can you tell us a little bit just about where that comes from, where that started?
Yeah, so my wife and I, we weren't sure we were even going to be able to have kids. And so our oldest didn't come along until we've been married about 9 or 10 years. So just the fact that God has given us 3 of our own, we're just thrilled and thankful to the Lord. And then around the time I was 29, I had a blood clot and pulmonary embolism, and God spared my life. And I realized that I had a genetic disorder that inclined me toward clotting. So, you're 29, you think you're invincible, you're going to live forever. And then you have something that is literally life-threatening. And it changes the way you think, changes the way you think about life, changes the way you think about your priorities. And so, you combine those things together, children that you love with all your heart, that God's given you, plus, my time on earth is short. And even if it's 80, 90 years old, it's still short. So I wanted to be able to put things into writing that I could pass off to my own kids. And in God's kindness, he's allowed it to go beyond that to other families as well.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And usually the profound works that God does, it starts at our home and it reveals his calling for us. Sometimes, I know for me, between my 4 walls, so that's fantastic. I want to just, before you get to the next question here, Brad, I want to say something to our listeners. They are doing some construction apparently right below us. So if you hear a low hum, and Champ, for you as well, that's not my stomach. It's they're drilling or doing something downstairs. So
it could be mine.
We can't do anything about that. So just as a bite, just a side note.
We have very good mics in our studio, and unfortunately they pick up everything. So our apologies for that. And in post-production, hopefully we can clean it up. So Champ, as you're talking, and I'm hearing the story about sort of your brush with mortality, this reality check, it sort of helps you simplify your priorities, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes you think that it thinks about the things that the Lord wants you to think about, because in some ways, is it Ecclesiastes that says that it's better to go to a house of mourning than to a house of laughter? And so the Lord wants us to have fun, of course. He invented laughter. He created it. He wants us to enjoy things richly. And yet, at the same time, he does want us to not live oblivious to the fact that we are mortal. And so when he brings those things into our lives, he uses those for our good as well.
Yeah, for sure. as I've looked at some of the book titles and I've looked at some of your blogs, you talk a lot about this idea that there is a need for us as Christians to plant these deep roots for our kids, to really give them a place to grow from spiritually. And that language, the way you're describing your faith, the way the ministry should form in the home, it sort of evokes in me an image of sort of legacy. This idea that goes back to the Psalms when David's talking about, make me like a tree planted by this river. Tell us a little bit more about what the books are that you've written and why you wrote them.
Yeah, so a couple years ago, I wrote a book called The Radical Book for Kids. You mentioned it earlier. If you go to Amazon and you search for books that like there's a book called The Dangerous Book for Boys or The Daring Book for Girls. It's like 100 things that every boy or a girl ought to know or know how to do. And it covers all sorts of really fascinating topics. The 7 wonders of the ancient world, 5 things every boy ought to have in his pockets, adventure stories, how to tie certain knots, things like that. And it occurred to me that, there's nothing like that out there for kids from a Christian perspective. And so that was sort of the genesis of the idea. And so the Radical Book for Kids is 67 little mini chapters, all arranged in kind of a grab bag kind of fashion that cover topics of interest, like topics related to the Bible, chapters related to theology, chapters related to Christian living, like how we handle fear, how we handle anger, daily living, like how do you manage friends or how do you clean your room, things like that, to biographies, little short chapters on men and women from church history, or fun stuff like how to make a sundial or a slingshot or a 3,000-year-old board game. So hopefully there's something there that draws kids in. And the idea there is that I want to give them enough information to make them curious. Curiosity is one of the greatest learning tools in life. So the book doesn't intend to be exhaustive. It's not encyclopedic. It's a starter kit for the Christian life. I want them to come in, soak in some of the basics, and then leave wanting to go and learn and read more, to be lifelong learners.
That's fantastic. We talk about that idea of curiosity a lot here in the programs that we develop, just more of inductive thinking rather than, just telling or instructing. And
Right.
We have found that the kids really resonate with that. As a parent, I know it's changed the way I look at teaching my kids. If I can lead them on a path to discover something by themselves, it definitely sticks much more than if I just said something. I'm sure that in the process of writing books, for me in writing my book, it opened my eyes to things that I was missing. How has the process of writing these kind of books, and Pass It On is another one I read earlier, is interesting, a side note that it was going to be called Words of Wisdom or something, and you didn't want to call it that because you didn't want to be like self-congratulatory or whatever. And I think that's pretty funny. But I'm
39. Let me tell you about wisdom here. Yeah.
Right. But in being an author, you are expected to kind of pass on words of wisdom, or like in the Radical Book for Kids. What I'm interested in your personal life, because there's the persona that's out there that's leading other parents and teaching. What has the process of writing these books done to your parenting style at your house?
Yeah, so in some ways, it's more about what parenting has done to books. Because like the book you mentioned, Pass It On, it's a devotional on the book of Proverbs. And that book came about because I just realized I don't know the book of Proverbs like I need to. I mean, here's like 900 something verses that I'm supposed to be able to apply at the drop of a hat to any random situation in my family to help my child grow up in wisdom. How in the world am I going to do that? I don't have an encyclopedic file card cabinet kind of mind. And so I thought, well, I'm going to learn Proverbs. And so I just printed it off, bound it into a spiral bound notebook, and just started chipping away and learning and praying and asking the Lord to show me and writing and thinking. And then eventually it became something that the publisher wanted to develop for others. But it really arose more out of my need to shepherd my own heart well and shepherd the hearts of my children well.
I hear that. So in looking at, you had said something a little bit off air about how your parenting style with your wife that you've developed, and talk to us a little bit about that, where that came from and what it is.
With parenting, I need something simple, something I can get my hands on that is portable throughout the day. And, the Lord, through prayer and seeking in his word, led me to think about it this way, in that one of my goals for my children, my primary goal, is that by the time they leave the house, that my wife and I want them to be living in reality with their lives and hearts synced up with what's really true about the world we live in. So, for example, it's portable at really any age. So for a 2-year-old, reality is you don't play on the stairs, right? Because the reality is if you play on the stairs, there's a good chance you're going to get hurt. Or you don't play around when mom's cooking, around in the stove, in the kitchen. So whatever it is, even when they get older, there's a way that God has made the world to work, right? And as someone has said, if you go against the grain of the universe, you're going to get splinters. So nice. We want our kids, as they're getting older, we want them to understand, this is how you treat friends. If you gossip, it's going to boomerang back around. As you get older, here's what the mall or commercials or television or other sources that aren't intrinsically bad, they're going to be spinning. Sometimes it's not always evil and wicked and immoral. Sometimes it's just not true. It's not, it's fiction about reality. And we want to provide another narrative that says, well, here's what's really true about the universe that God has made. And his word shows us the way to that. There's another reality in this world, and it's not just how God made the world, it's how he came into the world. And so another reality is that we're sinners, that God sent his son to come and to die for our sins, and that he saves those who put their trust in him and take refuge in him. And so all these are different realities of the world in which we live. And so we want our kids to live in that reality. And so that shifts and changes from day to day. Some realities need to be talked about on one day and other realities on other days. And so God's word points us and states what these realities are. And so to me, that's just our little easy shorthand way of saying this is what we're trying to do with our kids.
Got it. So I can't help, Champ, but notice as I've looked at the sort of progression of the books you've written that as your kids get older, the books are starting to get more complicated. There's definitely a parallel between what you're writing about and I think what you're experiencing as a parent. Is that true? Is that accurate?
And I used to work for a Bible curriculum publisher a number of years ago, and so I have a preschool Bible Storybook that's available. It's not on Amazon, but it's through them. And so, there's even more to the story. Yeah.
That's awesome. I know Robert and I have, between us, we have 9 kids, and we're just a little bit ahead of you on the curve, but not much. And, so the juggling between the pastoral role and then the idea that I'm sharing this journey in the writing, whether it's a blog or published work or a curriculum, the reality is that there's never that moment where you feel like I've got this. This is under wraps, and I have learned, quote, past tense, and I'm now able to teach. That never happens. So what we do share is this journey of parenting. And one of the things that I think our audience struggles with, and I want to talk about it, the three of us, is this idea that the culture is winning, that we are losing this battle in our culture today over faith. And one of the ways that comes out is the Barna statistics, some of the Orange work. These are all research groups that have said between 80 and 82% of our youth are leaving the church at the end of high school, and they make this decision somewhere around 13 years of age. So you've got a child now who's about to be 13. You've got 2 8-year-old twins. And we're in the middle of this culture war, and it's this media-driven, as you put it, narrative that our kids are being exposed to. As a parent, as a pastor, where do you see the most strategic battle lies for parents?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. And perhaps is an overly simplistic answer, and certainly no one answer is going to fit every scenario. So, sometimes the best parents, have the worst kid eventually, or, vice versa. So there's all these caveats about, what we think is the wisest course. But at least from my limited experience, my perspective and opinion would be that the greatest asset that a parent can have in terms of helping preserve the faith and integrity of their children's faith is, obviously first pray, because ultimately no parent can change a child's heart. Only the Lord can change and preserve and protect and nurture a child's heart. But then what parents also can do is to live humbly before their children. If my walk with Jesus is authentic at home and humble at home, and when I sin, I model what confession and repentance looks like. If I lose my temper, I become impatient. If I'm seeking their forgiveness and showing them how to live in light of the gospel, I feel like that's just so much more important than showing them that we're going to be the good family, or we're going to be the balanced family, or we're going to be the right family, having the right opinions about all these issues. I mean, that's good. It's good to be a doctrinal family. But if the child sees hypocrisy underneath that, or sees a pride that fails to own up to one's own limitations, then I don't know how appealing rightness and goodness and doctrinal orthodoxy is going to seem to a child.
Okay, I want to capture that and write it down.
Powerful.
Yeah, because that is exactly our heart. I mean, Robert and I are nodding our heads. I don't know that you can see this on people who can watch on YouTube will see this, but dude, yes, that's exactly right. I mean, as I asked that question, I had it in my mind, the word authenticity. That is the thing that we see in what we do as critical, and especially with the pastoral or leadership world, when you're parenting and you're a leader in the church, there is such pressure on us to get it, quote, right, to dial this in and
to be the model family.
Yeah, I mean, that's baloney. It's not going to happen. And so the idea then of the authenticity, the idea that we can actually model our faith in the messy and in the good and all that other stuff. What you just said was beautifully phrased, and I
agree. And I think
I'm jumping up and down. Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, kind of jumping up and down, but in his heart, he's jumping up and down. I think one of the practical ways to be authentic is what you keyed in, and I love this, and that is being humble. Humble before our kids. There is something incredibly powerful about that. I mean, I think authenticity starts with humility. It has to, right? Because we have to own our own stuff. And our kids seeing that is a bridge to actually having an authentic relationship. So what is that? You kind of alluded to it a little bit, but let's dive a little bit deeper into what that looks like in humbling ourselves before our kids. Because we see ourselves, and we are the leaders of our homes. But for a listener out there that might be thinking, yeah, but I've got to show strength, and I've got to show, what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong, and I've got to walk us through that, what that looks like in your home, modeling humility and just being humble for the sake of authenticity.
Yeah, so, I mean, authenticity doesn't mean I just let life happen and go, well, I'm just being authentic. That it's just like it gives me permission to sweep all this dust under the rug. That's not authenticity. Authenticity is, I'm authentically trying to live the Christian life, which means if I'm really honest about it, it means I'm not perfect at it, right? It's not, I'm authentically not trying to live the Christian life.
Yeah, it's not a free pass. Yeah.
No, right. It's not a free pass. It's exactly right. So authenticity means you try, so the days of saying we're going to have family Bible time together, 6 days a week. I mean, that's so far in the rearview mirror. I mean, authenticity says I'm going to try for 3 times this week.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I have young kids, so we're going to spend 5 minutes.
So when you talk about humility, let me ask you this, does that mean, is it humility just from a practical standpoint with our kids? Is that owning just when we fall short in our relationship with them? Or would you say that it also includes sharing the areas that we fall short of just in being consistent, or that doesn't have anything to do with them? I'm asking, it's kind of a loaded question, but walk us through that a little bit, this idea of being humble before our kids.
Yeah. I'm humble and I'm proud of it.
Right.
Let me tell you all about it. I mean, joking aside, I have a proud heart, right? So when we talk about humility, what we're talking about is we're living in reality. There's a God, and I'm not Him, and I don't want to put on airs or pretenses that I'm something that I'm not, right? I'm not the greatest dad ever, right? So I shouldn't act like I am or get mad at my kids if they, see through that and then they know that I'm not. So you're just trying to live life in a way that is, you're trying to live the fruit of the Spirit, in front of them, call them to that, model that, have normal conversations, spend time in the Word, talk about how, this is what I was thinking about today when I had my time in the Word, that the Lord convicted me that I'm not thinking about, A, B, and C, or that He reminded me how this aspect of what He's like, it perfectly helps me when I'm fearful or when I'm anxious or when I'm covetous. And so, you're just sharing as appropriate, like what God's doing in your life and calling them to do the same. And when you mess up, you own up. And so, it's just normal Christian living in front of younger people.
Man, it's so refreshing to hear you say that. I know in church culture, there is this temptation to look for the checklist book, the bestseller on how to raise your kids, on how to deal with certain subjects, how to be a good Christian. And so parents are looking for quick fixes because that's how our culture tells us, that there's a top 5 or there's a certain, template.
If you only do these things.
Yeah. If you just follow this pattern, then this will happen. And the truth is just a whole lot simpler and less exciting. And it comes down to what is happening behind the closed doors of your home. Does it match what you're saying and what you're doing in public?
Your kids don't need your to-do list, for parenting. They need you.
Right. Yeah.
They need a mom and a dad who are following Jesus as best they can and as humbly as they can, and calling them to do the same.
Absolutely. So, man, Champ, I really appreciate your heart and the way that you're sharing. As a guy who's writing books, I think the public perception of a parent could be that if you're an author, if you're a pastor, if you've got background in teaching others about the Bible, then you somehow are exempt from the stress and from the struggle that normal people have. And I think today's interview in part is sort of debunking that myth for parents to understand that their pastors and their leaders are all real people with real struggles, and God is showing up in their lives faithfully to help them get through.
Yeah. It's very true.
And it's important to know. I really, I think as we, you made a statement, there's a God and I'm not Him. And that whole statement has this huge influence on parents, and in particular in the area of control. This idea that if things aren't going exactly the way I want, then I just need to tighten down. I just need to get a little firmer. I just need to get tighter in the discipline area. And I know, Robert, you and I, as our kids went into the teenage years, we had to learn that not all defiance is defiance. Sometimes this is despair. Mm-hmm. That the way our kids respond to that authoritarian sort of grip, that is our sort of knee jerk, especially as dads, isn't always the right thing. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of humility, not only in being authentic, but also in being humble with the Lord and what should I do here? and really asking that question before we just use our logic. I know as a dad, that was a huge step for me. Have you had that experience, Champ?
Are you asking me or Robert?
I'm asking you. Have you had that experience where you sort of had a common sense reaction to something, and then when you prayed about it, the Lord said, hey, I know that makes sense to you, but that's not right for this child?
Yeah, I think that's where good communication, often between mom and dad, where possible, is very helpful. And just being open to like what's working, what's not working, how am I really knowing my child? But part of another governor on like how much control should I be wielding here over the life of my child is, I think I want to go back to what I said earlier about trying to prepare them to live in reality. So if reality out there is very structured and there are consequences, if certain patterns or orderliness is not followed, then I don't serve them well by giving them free passes and letting them live in a loosey-goosey structure of life in that area, because they're going to get out there and they're going to encounter reality, and they're going to have a very quick learning curve by people that don't love them nearly as much as I do. But on the other hand, if they don't need that much structure, and I'm just overcomplicating their life because I like a quiet house or a neat house or whatever, then it just depends. You have to kind of evaluate, like, what am I really doing here? What's the goal, and what does my child need? I mean, if the child themselves show inclinations toward being orderly, then we may have to watch about giving them assigning too much importance to orderliness, that we're feeding an idol in their life already. So I think you just have to, we have to be aware of the reality that we're living in order to help our children live in that reality.
That's good.
We've been listening to Pastor Champ Thornton, author, blogger, curriculum writer, and dad. And the insight and the humility in which you're sharing it with is very refreshing, honestly. Robert, you and I have interviewed a lot of people. This is our third season. And sometimes people really sort of believe that they've got an edge on others in how they're going to parent, right? And I don't get that sense from our guests today.
No, I don't. It's been wonderful talking to you. And I admire so much your pursuit of authenticity and like you said, a real life, dealing with life, preparing our kids for what life looks like on the other side of these four walls. And because this is really where that all happens, is in our house. And if we're not modeling, again, back to the authenticity, if we're not modeling how to react and how to handle a world which is hostile towards Christian beliefs, if we're not modeling that, then we're not setting them up to continue the faith in their own lives. So I appreciate very much your work and you spending time with us today. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Brad, Robert.
Thank you, Champ.
Great to be with you.
Yeah. God bless you. And for those who just are sort of about to sign off, please go check out Champ's website, champthornton.com. He has several books, especially for your kids if they're in the preteen years, about to enter the teen cycle. He's got some great stuff.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here with us.
Yeah, thanks again.
What our kids believe is going to define them for a lifetime. According to George Barna, by the age of 13, what a kid believes is what he'll die believing. For parents and for pastors, that's a frightening experience, especially if you've got an 11 or 12-year-old. At the I Shine Ministries headquarters, this became a huge priority in the last year. We partnered with the Tween Gospel Alliance to bring you a brand new resource known as the Shock and Awe Study Guide. And I'm here with one of the co-founders of this entire program, Robert Beeson. Can you tell us, what is the Shock and Awe Study Guide?
It is awesome. More than that? Yeah. Okay. The Shock and Awe Study Guide is a super cool thing that either a parent can do with their kid, or a youth pastor can do with their students, or a children's pastor can do with their students. And here's the cool thing about it. It is apologetics for kids. So it's the really huge evidence and thoughts of apologetics wrapped in a way that is really tangible and simple for kids to understand, answering 4 primary questions. And they are, what if there's a God? What if the Bible is true? What if Jesus is who he said he was? And what if I'm part of that plan? And we believe if you can answer those 4 questions and you are drawn through evidence proving those 4 questions, that really it's gonna establish a pretty unshakable foundation of faith.
That sounds very helpful, especially if you're a parent or pastor and you're concerned about the condition of your child's faith, what they believe, what the voices of culture are telling them. If that's you and you're interested, go to ishinelive.com and check out in our web store the Shock and Awe Study Guide. It has a digital cloud video base, so it's 4 studies in a small paperback volume for $9, and it has 4 videos that go with 4 studies. It can be done in a weekend, it can be done over a month, or it can be done bi-monthly, however you need it. It is a fantastic resource that I have used as a pastor in my own home church, and I have been impressed. So check it out.
Check it out.
Well, Robert, we just got a chance to speak with Champ. I love that name, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like... And then his image, for those who watch on YouTube, you're going to see this guy is scholarly. I mean, he's got the glasses and the whole look, right?
Well, if you measure someone by the outward appearance, then yeah.
Well, sometimes I do.
But also by the
intellect. But you can tell he's serious about books. You can tell he's serious about education, and he's thoughtful and he's well-read. I mean, this is not just impulsive writing. I mean, this is somebody who's actually
very deliberate about what he does.
Yeah, exactly.
I enjoy talking to him, and I loved his constant pursuit of authenticity and preparing our kids for the real life. So I was grateful to have his insight.
Well, with my medical background, the whole history of pulmonary embolism, that's a serious thing. And the fact that at 29, he had to really face death, I can tell that was a transformative moment in his life. And so everything has sort of flowed from that. Mm-hmm. And so he talks older than he is. He thinks older than his generation. I mean, everything about him is more mature. I mean, he seems like someone older than us, right? A little
Certainly
more mature
wiser
than I am. Yeah.
Definitely. But great insight, and there is energy to, I think, his approach to everything. Obviously, he's written so many books, and he just continues to go. And someone that is watching his own life and pulling from his own home to help others, I think, is always admirable, and I'm really glad he was here.
I am too, and I think if you're in the Delaware area, you should probably look this guy up, maybe go listen to him live somewhere at his church. We'll have his information on our website. His website is very good, and it has some very thought-provoking blogs.
I agree.
Really good stuff about his books. I mean, the books have very specific goals. They're not just another great idea. I mean, he's very much equipping his kids for life outside of the home. I know for our audience that should resonate with them.
I agree.
I think we're all wanting to equip our kids. One of the things that was so refreshing is the fact that when we got down to the nitty-gritty, when it was, okay, what is this thing that we can do as parents? His response was to live humbly. Mm-hmm. That's pretty unusual for pastors, right?
But it's spot on, I think.
It is, right?
I've seen that in my own life.
So, one of the things you and I say a lot is that, if as broken parents, how can we expect to have perfect kids? Mm-hmm. This whole idea that we're expecting some outcome that's impossible.
Right.
And because we have a Christian faith and we drop our kids off at church, that somehow they're going to avoid all of the pitfalls of life is just, that's not.
Because God uses mess to transform our lives.
He really does.
In our kids' lives as well as ours.
Yeah. And so he kept saying over and over that I'm trying to speak another narrative to my kids about the reality of the world. I think as we examine culture and we think about how Christians exist in a hostile culture of the post-Christian era, this is a very good podcast for people who want to think about that. They want to process that. They need something practical and simple that they can do with their kids. These books that he's doing are meant to be done together. And especially that pass it on, the idea of Proverbs. And, it's a journal format. There's a cool little video on his website that parents can watch with their kids and go, hey, let's go through that.
Yeah.
What a great introduction to studying Scripture, and then not just understanding that Scripture is relevant, but that it's helpful in today's life.
Yep.
The Proverbs are a great way to start that.
Outstanding. I agree. Couldn't agree more.
All right, guys. Well, that's going to wrap it up for today's edition of Brilliantly Brave Parenting. We are grateful you're here, please go to our Facebook or social media site and like us, follow us, and share it with a friend.
We'll talk to you soon.
Parents, remember, even if you may not feel brilliant or brave, you are. For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power, and love, and self-control. And I am not ashamed, for I know whom I have believed. I am convinced that he is able to guard until that day what has been entrusted to me. 2 Timothy 1:7 and 13. This podcast is a service of iShine Ministries and the Tween Gospel Alliance. All rights reserved. Donations to Brilliantly Brave are tax deductible at ishinelive.com. Review and subscribe to this podcast on SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, or on our webpage. And read our blog and connect with us at wordpress@brilliantlybrave.com. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Brilliantly Brave.
iShine is a faith-based ministry and media company that looks and feels a lot like a Christian version of Disney. iShine is more than entertainment. We're the producer of the largest Christian tween TV series in the world, a nationally syndicated radio show, a Nashville-based record label, host to multiple live tours and summer festivals, an interactive website and social media, and a provider of printed and digital devotionals, preteen Bibles, and church curriculums. But more than anything, we're a trusted Christian resource for parents and pastors. You can turn to us for all things tween. Check us out at ishinelive.com.
We're made to shine. Hey parents and grandparents, this is Zach Fay, creator of Light Gliders, a digital game world of Christian faith and fun. The critical years to impact kids for Christ are before the age of 13, and kids are spending more time digitally connected than ever before. Light Gliders was created to redeem this time and to encourage faith, values, and meaningful conversations among the kids you care about. Visit us today at lightgliders.com or download the Light Gliders app.